When I talk to parents, they're like, "Oh, you're like the first parent that I've talked to that has had the condition. I thought I was all alone." And I think the one thing is that I just want to say that like you're not alone. Actually, collectively, congenital kidney diseases like CAKUT actually make up close to the majority of what they see in a pediatric clinic. There's great research out there, and there's ultimately community out there as well.
Hello, I'm LaVarn Burton.
I'm Tamara Ruggiero.
And I'm Mike Spigler.
Welcome to Season 2 of the American Kidney Fund's podcast, The Kidney Collective, which gives an intimate voice to the many facets of living with kidney disease.
Our theme for this season is Rare Voices, Relatable Stories.
Over the next few months, we'll be talking about rare kidney diseases and explore the shared experiences that connect the entire kidney community.
Join us for these candid conversations that offer both information and inspiration.
Welcome, everyone. On this episode of the Kidney Collective, we are joined by Vincent Ko. Vincent is the executive director and founder of KidneyFuture, formerly known as the CAKUT Foundation, an organization dedicated to bring together patients and families living with CAKUT with clinicians, researchers, and advocates to improve outcomes for people living with CAKUT.
Just to start, what is CAKUT? What does that acronym stand for?
CAKUT stands for congenital abnormalities of the kidney and urinary tract, but it's really just a fancy way that doctors refer to pretty much anyone or a kid that's born with a kidney difference. So that could be a kidney or urinary tract difference that ultimately affects their kidneys as they grow up.
And you're the founder of KidneyFuture.
Yeah, that's right.
And so tell us what inspired you to found KidneyFuture.
It all stems from my experience as a father. So my daughter was born with a kidney difference, or CAKUT. And for me, just like a lot of other parents, it was about finding answers. So finding out what's going to happen to my daughter, what's going to happen in her future. And it ultimately came down to asking kidney doctors what they wanted. And we found out that there was a very big void in the space, despite it making up the majority of pediatric nephrology. Apparently no one's working on it. So decided to take the reins and started the foundation.
How did you find out about her diagnosis? I mean, was this something that you find out kind of in utero or after she was born? And anytime you find out anything is happening with your child, obviously it's a very emotional experience. I'm curious kind of how you dealt with that, what your reaction was.
Yeah, so the majority of parents in modern day times, they all usually find out through a prenatal ultrasound. And unfortunately, it happens as the mom is pregnant. The doctor comes in and says, we see something of concern. In some cases, it resolves itself, but in other cases, like those in our community, unfortunately, it leads to something that is confirmed once a child's born.
And had you ever heard of what she was dealing with before? Had you ever heard of CAKUT?
Actually, I didn't hear about CAKUT, the term CAKUT, until maybe a couple of years into the journey. I think as parents, we hear about your kid was born with one kidney, abnormal kidneys, they have a blockage, they have a UTI, these kind of general terms. It was only until a doctor about 5 years later actually explained to me that CAKUT is this lump bag term that the doctors use. So I had never heard about it. And I never heard or met anyone that was born actually with a kidney difference.
It's funny because I will go out in the community sometimes, or just even at like a dinner or something, and meeting people socially, and they'll ask where I work, and I'll say that. And more people than I would expect will say, I was only born with one kidney, or I have 3 kidneys. It's something that people don't seem to really talk about that much, but is, I think, more prevalent, at least, in the circles that I run in, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had that same experience too, where you're at a dinner and you're saying, oh yeah, I have a sister that had this, or I myself was born with a kidney difference. It's more common than we think.
What was it, if you could just talk through a little bit about what your experience was like when your daughter was born, being, was this your first child?
Yeah. So it was my first child. Yeah.
That must have been a very emotional, you probably went through all kinds of emotions when she was born, learning that she had a kidney difference. Talk through what that experience was like.
Yeah, so it was a double whammy. It was right in the middle of COVID. So not only did it feel like the world was going kind of crazy, at the same time, we had a daughter that was on the way, and we knew that we would have a series of hospital visits. And I think, the one thing that unfortunately unifies the community is that it's this fear of the future, fear of the unknown, because it's your child. You want them to have a good life when they grow up. But when you hear this, your mind only wanders of what's going to happen or even the negative scenarios. So yeah, the first reaction truly was fear, unfortunately.
And you mentioned kind of the acronym meaning, and the congenital, obviously for those listening, means that this was something that she was born with and may run in the family. Does anyone else in your family have kidney or urinary tract issues that you know about?
Yeah, great question. So no one in our family has it. And through our foundation, we have found out that actually for CAKUT, this lump bag term, about 10 to 14% can be tracked back to genetics that we understand today. The remaining 80 or so percent, we either don't know enough information or it is just random. So in our particular family, we did genetic testing. That genetic testing enabled us to have our second child because it wasn't genetic. But in our case, yeah, parts of the community are genetic based, and then the remaining are not.
Did you have to push hard or convince the doctors to do the genetic testing? Was it something they offered, or were you the one that had to kind of push for it?
A funny story. So actually, through our foundation, we were looking at a genetics testing company was looking to partner with us. And part of that experience, I actually just asked my doctor, I said, have you heard of this genetic testing company? We're about to possibly work with them. Do you know about it? And the funny thing is, she said, actually, we have boxes right here. Let me go get one. So they were like in the back. They existed. It's just like not top of mind when it comes to congenital kidney disease. And so it's not the top thing that doctors think about right away.
One of the things that come up very often in genetic testing is something where there's a gene variant that's maybe not one-on-one associated with the disease, but there's something that they're tracking, and they usually call that a variant of unknown significance, or VUS. Did you encounter any of those?
Oh yeah, no. So I think right now with CAKUT, if you take, for example, like a Natera test or I believe an Invitae test, so there are actual genes that are correlated with kidney differences or CAKUT. And so from my knowledge, I'm not familiar with variants of unknown significance at the moment.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how your daughter is doing now and how this has affected her life, and how is she progressing? How is she managing her kidney difference?
I think that this may be also for other parents with kids that are born with the kidney differences. I think in her mind, there's nothing different about her. I think the one thing that differentiates our community versus maybe other communities or glomeruli or adults is the fact that as parents, you want your kids to be normal. So you try as much for them to be normal. So there's a chance, she may never even know that she's different. Maybe when she's 18, she realizes I went in for a lot of blood draws. I saw the doctor a lot more than my friends. But our goal as parents from day one has actually to make her as normal as possible. Interestingly enough, before starting this foundation, I would say 4 people knew about my daughter's condition: my parents and my parents-in-law. That was it. And I think that is probably also the case with a lot of families. We kind of keep it to ourselves. And so, yeah, my daughter, we don't do anything different. The main thing we do differently is obviously go to the doctors a lot, as well as maintain diet. And things like that.
That resonates with me. My nephew was born missing part of his right arm, and his at first it was such a shock, and his parents went through all of the emotions, and he's now 16, and in the family we don't even really think about his arm. We don't even notice it, and he does everything perfectly normally. He has no issues. They have to restrain him from taking chances on things. He's kind of a daredevil. He told my brother he'd like to go into extreme sports when he grows up, which I don't know. We'll see about that. But it's interesting how kids adapt, and it's what they know and it's what they live with, right?
One of the challenges, though, I just came back from a pediatric nephrology conference, and one of the challenges that was described is that for other diseases where it may happen later in life, maybe when they're an adult or teen, they can kind of understand what's going on. The issue with CAKUT and congenital kidney disease is the kid doesn't know. And so that transition time is actually really difficult. So when they transition from adolescence and they go out of the nest, adherence and understanding. So it's a double-edged sword.
That's a big issue, going out of the nest and being adherent with their medications. How are you thinking about preparing your daughter for that?
Great question. My daughter's only 5, so I haven't thought about that. Others in the community have thought about it. But yeah, I know it's a challenge for sure from others that I've heard.
If there's anyone listening, another parent that's just finding this out, what advice do you have from them kind of on the early stages of this and kind of adapting to this new reality?
I hear this over and over again, but like when I talk to parents, they're like, oh, you're like the first parent that I've talked to that has had the condition, I thought I was all alone. And I think the one thing is that I just want to say that like you're not alone. Actually, collectively, congenital kidney diseases like CAKUT actually make up close to the majority of what they see in a pediatric clinic. And so one, you're not alone. And two, find resources like our foundation, find resources like the American Kidney Fund. There's great resources out there, and there's ultimately community out there as well.
Well, that's a great transition. And, a nonprofit like yours that it's really aiming at trying to bring, lots of things. But one thing that I think is so valuable is bringing people together that really have not met someone else that is dealing with this. I'm sure that's probably one of many reasons. But could you talk a little bit more about KidneyFuture and why you founded it?
It was actually founded by my old nephrologist. So my daughter was born abroad. And in a recent trip back, actually have like this model pen. I literally have this pen. And I literally asked her in the meeting, I was just curious. I was like, imagine this is a magic wand. What does it do for pediatric nephrology? And like, she didn't hesitate. She's like, you really want to know? I was like, yeah. She's like, your daughter falls into this bucket we call CAKUT. The first time I ever heard the term, by the way. And she says, this makes up the majority of what we see in clinic. And I have two magic wands, like without hesitation. She said, one, I want to know within the CAKUT bucket who progresses and who doesn't, because by the time they start losing kidney function, it's too late. And number two, I wish for more targeted therapies. She said that all the medications we have right now in pediatrics are blunt. And she was referring to high blood pressure medications. She says, I wish for targeted therapies. And I was like, okay. And I went back to the United States after that trip to Asia, and I asked my American nephrologists, and they said the exact same thing. And then I would just go around the country and I would hear the same thing over and over again. And then I talked to parents, and you ask parents, what are your two magic wands? And they will say the exact same thing. I want to know, is my kid going to progress, or are they not going to progress? Are they in the high risk bucket, low risk bucket? What's going to happen to my kid? And number two, one day if something goes south, kidney preservation is my number one priority, and I want therapies there. And so when we realized that the doctors want the same thing, the patients want the same thing, then I spoke with some doctors and asked if anyone was working on it, and they said no. But other patient foundations had really paved the way for future therapies and understanding their disease. So that's ultimately what led to us creating KidneyFuture along with some other parents.
Well, a crowdsourced and consensus mission sounds like a very good one. So congratulations on doing that.
So what are some of the projects KidneyFuture is working on now?
The very first thing is obviously the patient voice. And so we're not trying to overlap on resources. So for example, there's like great diet advice at American Kidney Fund with the Kidney Kitchen and other resources. We're trying to build resources that we don't see that parents want. So the first thing would be simple medical explainers using fifth grade language on various terms like protein in the urine or living with one kidney. And it's for the kids, but we found out it's actually as much for the parents, because when you bring it down to a fifth grade level, they get it. Number two, we have children's books and stuff like that. Once again, it's for the kids, but also it's as much for the parent to understand what's going on. So that's on the patient advocacy side, bringing the community together. On the other front is that those two magic wands that I mentioned, who progresses and doesn't and why. And number two, therapies. And so what we have been doing is bringing together the community. So whether that's parents, patients, researchers, academics, but also people like industry, pharma companies, regulators, because they really make up this ecosystem that allows us to have hopefully kidney protective therapies one day. So we spend a lot of time as our foundation really making sure that that community comes together to try and solve those problems together. We're making progress, which is pretty exciting.
Fantastic. Can you talk a little about that, especially on the research side? Because, especially when there really has not been a lot of innovation and progress in an area, sometimes it's hard to even know where to start. I've definitely talked to a lot of organizations, rare kidney disease organizations starting, and I'm always amazed about, the power that they have to bring these researchers together. Tell me kind of like your plan of attack and your strategy for how you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go back to one of the very first magic wands, which is like in CAKUT and congenital kidney diseases. Is there a way for doctors to realize which kid is going to go downhill and not earlier before they've already lost kidney function? And actually just came back from a conference for academics in Miami last week. And I heard a doctor from Yale speak on this. And, they've been researching this for their career. This is what they do. And it's very interesting to see that actually there may be someone at Yale, there might be someone in Boston, and there might be someone in Heidelberg, Germany, all working on the same thing. And our goal is to bring those people together so collectively they can all answer the question. And so if Europeans see it and in Asia they see it, in America they see it, ultimately that's how science moves forward. And so our goal is really just to unify the science and then hopefully answer that first magic wand. Who's going to progress? Who doesn't? How can we intervene earlier? On the second one, it's therapies. And therapies is really bringing together industry, which we know as pharmaceutical companies. They make therapies. Unfortunately, the way it is currently, a lot of therapies are only for adults. And we are trying to figure out whether those therapies make sense for our community and whether they are safe and effective, because children are precious. Children are the world's of the parents. So we need to make sure that is the case.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I know that cancer therapies, for example, are very harsh on children oftentimes, and is the same true for kidney therapies.
So in short, for CAKUT, a lot of the therapies that we are looking at are therapies that have been proven to be safe and effective in adults. And so CAKUT is not like an autoimmune disease. It's not like IgA nephropathy. It's actually believed to just be people that are born with less nephrons or filtering units, and it's just hemodynamic, meaning they just need to make sure their kidneys last a long time. So a lot of therapies that are standard of care in adults, SGLT2 inhibitors, MRAs, these are classes of existing therapies, are very likely the first therapies that we are looking for our community. So it's really about getting adult therapies and making sure that the ones that are safe and effective are safe and effective in children. It's not novel drugs. It's not new. It's really just making sure we are either the second, third, or fourth indication for a therapy.
Vincent, we talked about the importance of and the beauty of really connecting parents to understand this, but there's so few kids that are dealing with kidney problems overall, whether it's a rare kidney disease or a congenital issue. Is that something that you're looking at with KidneyFuture as well, as kind of bringing kids together? I mean, we have a virtual camp that we run for kids that are on dialysis or gotten a transplant. And it is just amazing to see them light up and the bonds that they form with each other, despite being potentially even on different coasts, right? To do that. I mean, have you seen that? And do you have plans with KidneyFuture to try to get those kids together as well?
Yeah, great question. So this is an example of do not replicate, do not duplicate. So, I mean, in an ideal world, I think we'd be at that center place, but I would love to actually refer kids to your camp. I've seen the camp. It looks super cool. Kids come together, and whether that kid has born with kidney disease or whether they acquired it from something like a glomerular disease later, I think ultimately they'll be able to relate with one another. So we do not have any plans to run summer camps. You shouldn't try and beat something that's already been going really, really well. So if it's anything, we would actually probably be one of your top referrers in the future.
Great. Well,
yeah, we have some great stories from that camp. We have two little girls that we call them the two Emmas. They live far, far away from each other. They both have cystinosis, and we brought them to our gala, the Hope Affair, this year to meet together on stage. They've become best friends as a result of being in the camp, which is just such a great story.
Absolutely, yeah. Shared experience at the end of the day is what connects people, right?
Yeah. What about bringing the researchers? You mentioned bringing together researchers from all over the world who are working on researching in this area. What has that meant for researchers? What do you hear from them about the ability to collaborate with each other?
For a lot of these researchers, for a lot of those in pediatric nephrology, they understand that this has been a huge missing piece. It makes up oftentimes the majority, or at least the number one reason what they see in clinic. And so as far as gathering the community, it actually has been, pediatric nephrologists are like the nicest people. And so when they hear about this movement, they're all willing to help. Every doctor has been willing to introduce me to someone, introduce our foundation to someone, join, support our medical advisory board. And so we found that actually it's a mission that a lot of doctors can get behind, especially pediatric nephrologists. So I don't want to say it's been easy, but we just had a lot of support from the community.
It's probably been very much welcomed, it sounds like.
Exactly, yeah.
Now that you've talked to lots of parents, you've talked to the researchers, it seems like you're really doing a great job of bringing the right people together. Let me ask you a moonshot question. And we talked about cancer. There's a cancer moonshot program that's been started. Looking ahead over the next decade or two, what do you think is one breakthrough that would be a meaningful inflection point for your community?
If you asked me a year ago, it would be that magic wand question that I asked that doctor in Asia a long time ago. It's, can we predict who is going to progress earlier before it's too late? And are there therapies that can really protect the kidneys or at least help with the decline. That would have been like the 10-year moonshot, 15-year moonshot. A year later, I would say with the community coming together, I would say it's not even a moonshot at this point. I say that I can see the future. I would say, what's the term for moonshot, but a 5-10-year moonshot? I don't know what that is. Like a
stratosphere shot? I'm not really sure.
Stratosphere shot. Yeah.
Asteroid shot.
So it seems doable. And I will admit that a lot of this is not because we are special. We follow the tracks that have been laid by other patient foundations, whether it's a NephCure or whether it's an Allport Foundation or the IgA Nephropathy Foundation. They've done it. They've cleared the path. And so I think if we had done this 10 years ago, yeah, it would be a moonshot. But because other patient foundations have accelerated and cleared out that forest, the path is quite clear. So that moonshot, I would say 5 to 10 years, not a 20-year moonshot.
Well, Vincent, thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
And Vincent, if anyone is not looking at the show notes and they just want to listen to this and type it in, what is the link to your website?
KidneyFuture.org.
Well, Vincent, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
To find out more about the topics we discussed in this episode, or to access resources to learn more about kidney disease, go to the episode show notes on your podcast listening platform or go to kidneyfund.org/podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe or follow the Kidney Collective wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us a like or review to help us reach more members of the kidney community.
You can also follow AKF on all major social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, X, or whatever comes next. Join us next time. Remember that even in the toughest moments, there's hope ahead, and the Kidney Collective and AKF are here for you now.